Greetings, Mark Garang, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun here. And today my guest is Cathie Gregg of the Elaine Conners Wildcare.
Hi, Mark.
Kathy, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, good. Thanks for joining. It's springtime. Everybody's having babies out there, right?
Yes.
But before we talk about the babies, which is what everybody wants to know, describe your operation a little bit. I know you're in Madison somewhere.
Yep.
And how many people volunteer? How does that all work?
We are looking for volunteers right now, but we do have 4 to 5 that we are training to come on board. We've got roughly 4 to 5 staff. The Wildlife Center, I have been rehabbing in the Madison area since 1986. So I've got like 38 years in this. The Wildlife Center started in 1991, so it's just turning 33 years old. We take in injured and orphaned wildlife. We're trying to keep it local because it just blew up when we took from all over the state. So we try to, you know, just keep it on the local side. Carroll County, we do cover up to Canada, which is all of Coos, if we have the room.
Wow. So people, like if someone in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire
Yes.
comes across an injured owl, they start dialing
They do.
wild care centers in
Yep.
your name? How many
Yes.
are in the state? I guess that's one.
Not many, and nowhere near enough. So that is one of the reasons that I wanted to kick back to work in the office so that we could train more interested people to do this.
All right. So for volunteers, you have staff, right? And you said you have a new person from Michigan?
Yes, she started about a month ago after a very, very long search. So she has moved into the animal care position and she lives at the center. This allows me to bump back into office work so that I can meet donors, write the newsletters, raise money, and most importantly, write grants.
And if someone wants to, you mentioned volunteers, if someone wants to, a local person wants to volunteer, what does that mean? Does that mean like 2 hours on a Saturday morning?
It could. Generally, what we're looking for might be a 4-hour shift at a time because it takes us a long time to train volunteers. And the other thing is if they only come in for a short amount of time, they miss a lot of that animal's growth.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, when you say animal's growth, so if you're a volunteer and you're looking after an owl, that could be the owl that you look after until the owl is convalesced?
Yep, we do get a lot of juveniles or nestlings or fledglings that fall out of the nest, land on the ground. Most of our owls are hit by cars. We are in the process this year of taking down our old raptor pen and putting up a new one with grant money. So we are probably not going to care for owls at the center, but we are going to take them in.
What does that mean?
It means that I will move them to another rehab center in the state. But we will take them in and do all of the, you know, the initial care until they're ready to be moved.
All right, and getting back to the volunteers, if someone is watching this and they want to volunteer, do they just call you directly?
Call me, 367-WILD.
367 Wild, there we go.
Yep.
All righty, so let's go through some animals.
Sure.
All right, so Rob, you have some slides, you want to just put them up at random and then we'll talk about them? Why don't we do that? Well, what do you know? That looks like a baby fawn, as we call them in the trade.
White-tailed deer fawn. You can see I'm gloved. And they're going to start dropping any minute. They start mid-May through the end of June. One of the most important reasons that I wanted to be here is to caution people not to pick up deer fawns. Just because you see one does not mean that it needs you. If you cannot know that the mother is dead, leave it alone and call us. We will talk you through how to watch it, how long to leave it there, things to look for. You can go to our website and there's a trifold brochure on there about deer fawns and when they need help and when they don't. If they're lying on their side, if they're covered with flies, if they're injured, you know, things like that, they obviously need help. Does have a way of leaving their fawns in odd places. We had one that was left at a mailbox, and they often leave them at the edge of a garden. at the edge of your basement wall. But they will come back for them after dark. And they only feed their babies twice a day, morning and night. Fawns are born without a scent.
That's the idea. Is that why they drop them and the mothers go away, right?
The mothers go away because it's her scent that's going to bring in predators that are going to kill her baby. So she drops them, and then she goes away, and then she comes back.
Wow. So so if I know deer is a very high-profile animal this time of year. How many deer are out there that people find? I mean, I've never.
Too many. Too many that don't need to be found, because...
Like what kind of numbers? You get like 5 a year?
I had to stop taking them. We were getting so many.
And these are healthy
These
fawns?
are healthy. Some of them,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think it was 3 years ago that I got in the 20s.
Really?
And yeah, and we were getting such a high mortality with them, plus all the other animals at the Wildlife Center, we had to kick that back. So I have now put a limit on it. Well, last year I put a limit on it of, we're going to take in 3 deer and we're going to take in 2 moose. And all the deer we took in lived. And the year before that, that was not the case because we had too many to take care of.
So when you say you take them in, what happens if someone calls and says, well, I have one, and you say no?
First of all, they're not going to call me. They're going to call the Fish and Game department. Fish and Game is going to call me and ask me if I've got room for it. Beyond what I can take in, Fish and Game needs to figure out what is the best plan to see if they can get them reunited with the mother. If people call us, if they see a fawn, a lot of people do call me rather than calling Fish and Game. We can talk them through different scenarios as to why the mother may have left it, how long to watch it. Call us the next day if you still see it there.
Typically, how long are they out? Is the fawn out there before either gets? Because the fawn's not mobile at that point, right?
Yeah, they are.
They are.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Within a day, they're up and following the mother around.
So that vulnerable period is really that short a time. They drop, boom, and like within a day or two, they're up and going and gone.
They're up and going and gone, but the mother leaves them, and that's when people pick them up, and they can pick them up anywhere within the first several weeks.
Even if the fawn is walking around, people pick them up.
But they're not usually walking around. They're usually curled up, sleeping.
I get it. Hey, can I ask a related deer question? How do I keep a deer out of my garden?
Try soap.
Soap?
I've used soap before on
What
a
does that mean?
string. Just hang soap on a string.
Like a bar soap?
Yeah. You can. I would not use things like coyote urine, fox urine. I know that they are promoted as far as keeping deer out of your garden, but you can also bring in those predators.
So you're saying, so you're saying literally hang bars of soap,
Try it. I've done it.
and obviously deer are repelled by soap somehow.
Yeah. There are a lot of repellents that people can use to keep wildlife out of their yards. Again, if you've got a problem with a woodchuck in your garden or something, give us a call. We'll figure it out. We don't like to see animals trapped and relocated. They could leave babies behind, but also you're moving that problem to another area. And the other thing too is if you remove that animal from your yard, you're opening up that niche for something else that you may not want even more.
Well, I know I have a deer that's already eating my hostas.
They love hostas.
You know.
That's why I hung soap.
You know, and I had a little dog that I think kind of kept him away, and he's gone now. So, like, I'm like the Morrison Cafe or something.
Right.
But anyway, so what about flying squirrels? Now I had a flying. We've got plenty of photos we want to get to, but like when you say don't relocate, I had flying squirrels in my house last year, and I trapped with a have a heart 4 or 5 of them, and they were friendly little guys, I will say. You know, they're not shy, and I read about them and it said relocate them like 3 miles away so they come back. So that's what I did. Is that not the right thing to do?
No, if you're going to, you've got to take them far away. The thing about flying squirrels is if you've got a couple, you've got a colony.
Well, I think I trapped 6 or 7.
Yeah, you might want to find out where they're coming in
Yeah.
and seal that up.
All right, so let's go to animal number 2, Rob, please. What is that?
That is some kind of baby heron, might be a green heron. This is one of those animals that we moved to another center because we don't get a lot of these.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but that's obviously a little gray squirrel.
This is what we are getting in now every day, or 4 or 5 times a week. They're falling out of trees. It was really bad a couple of weeks ago because they were falling out of trees into the snow. So, you know, they were dying, they were, you know, so people were picking them up, bringing them in. So we have some right now that we've got in-house, in cages. We've got some that we are getting ready to move outside into outdoor cages, and within a couple of weeks, they'll be ready to release.
So do you recommend, and I think I brought some to you.
You did.
Like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When my kids were small, we had these little tiny red
They were
squirrels
little
running around.
reds, yeah.
So, but is that, you recommend that to bring them to you, or just let them go
yeah.
and let them go back up on the tree?
They're usually too young to go back up on the tree, but a lot of times we get baby squirrels because the mother's been killed in the street.
I see.
Yeah.
And then you convalesce them, because squirrels, I mean, they're kind of like on the low rung of the wildlife
They are.
ladder, and they get run over all the time.
Think of them as a prey species.
You mean
know,
to help the...
they help the whole chain of life.
And then when we had that squirrel population explosion like 3 or 4 years ago, that was because...
Beats me.
Well, I mean, I guess part of that was because we had a big mast year.
Right.
You know, it's a cycle. We have a lot
Yes,
of
it is.
acorns, a lot of rodents, a lot of mice, then, because we had, after that year, I had bobcats around my house eating the squirrels.
Yep. Bobcats are one of my favorite animals to take in. And
Why is that?
I love them. First of all, I love cats.
Yeah.
But we might get one a year. We might get a kitten coming in pretty soon. I got a call from Fish and Game a few days ago about a kitten, and Fish and Game went across the state to see what was going on and reviewed the tape, and it was actually an adult. So
Wow.
we did not get it. They are, you know, they're kind of like Fisher. I think they've got a really undeserved reputation. We do take in Fisher. We usually get them 4 at a time. They're cavity dwellers. We usually get them from loggers who cut down a tree and then bring us the whole litter. They're fun to raise. They're not going to go out and kill your firstborn. They are, but bobcats, at this time of year, we're apt to get a very young one. Later in the spring, June and July, we're apt to get an older adolescent, but the time that we really get them is going to be in December, right around the holidays, because the snow's on the ground. They've got legs this long and the snow's this deep. They are opportunistic. If they see a pathway that goes to the bird feeder, that's their easiest way to get food.
Now, a Fisher, and people call them Fisher cats.
They're not.
And even though we have a hockey team, they name Fisher cats.
Right.
But Fisher is the correct name, right?
Correct.
And a Fisher is really like a little mammal, a tough little guy, but like it's not a rodent.
It's a weasel.
It's a weasel. That's what it is. It's a weasel family. And the other thing is this true? They have this awful screech. Oh,
Well,
odor.
yeah. Oh, they've got an awful odor.
Oh,
It's,
they do.
it's. I don't find it offensive, but it's musky. And yes, they have an awful screech, but so does a fox. You know, either one of those are apt to make you bolt upright in bed in the middle of the night.
So it could be a fox. Do you
Could
have
be.
kids? Because I know actually my ex-wife's property with my kids that go there, and they showed me every year there's a bank, and they have 5 kits of, you know, fox has a den there. This year there are 5. Is that, do you get many, are they
They're
called kits?
Fun to watch.
Yeah.
They are, and we can get into that if you want, because they are on the rabies vector species list.
Okay, let's go into rabies.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. As we talked about briefly yesterday, there are 5 animals in New Hampshire that are on the rabies vector species list: bats, fox, raccoons, skunks, and, believe it or not, woodchucks. It doesn't mean they have rabies. It means that they are higher up on the mammal list that can carry it. If you see one and you need to intervene, always make sure you're gloved. Because if you handle a rabies vector species and you are not gloved, the state's going to step in, confiscate it, euthanize it, and test it for rabies, because at that point it's a human exposure.
So, I mean, woodchucks, I mean, bats, people don't come in contact with bats. I mean, raccoons and fox, because we hear these crazy stories, because when they're rabid, they lose their minds, basically, and fox attack people, correct?
You've got two different kinds of rabies. You've got the dumb rabies and you've got the furious rabies, and everything.
The dumb rabies and the what rabies?
Furious.
Furious?
And everything in between. It just means different behavior. We don't take in rabies vector species for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have quarantine cages to keep them away from the deer fawns. Also, many years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I did take in a fox kit about this big. It was soccer ball size. It was fine until it wasn't. It had rabies.
So if you see in the sign of a rabid animal, is that if they're out in the open, like a fox, if they're just wandering around in your driveway during the day, in a raccoon, chances are they're not right.
No, chances are they're feeding their young.
Oh.
Yeah. Just because you see an animal out in the daytime, just remember the phrase, babies, not rabies.
Okay.
They can be out looking for food to feed their babies, especially at this time of year. Don't go near them, leave them alone. If you see anything that is strange, give us a call. The other thing that can mimic rabies would be distemper. We do see that in fox, but the other thing that we see a lot of is mange. And people will call me and say, I've got a rabid fox in my yard. They send me a picture. I can't diagnose. I'm not a vet, but more times than not, it's going to be mange.
And what's mange?
It's a mite that burrows under the skin. You can treat it, some people do, but when it gets out of hand and it's covering the whole body and the face is covered and the tail is bare, the best thing is to humanely euthanize it.
Oh, wow. So they just look rough when you see them?
Very rough.
Okay.
Yeah. Doesn't mean it's rabid, but it also means that you don't want to fool around with it.
All right. So possum, I found in the late fall in my garage.
You have a ton of wildlife.
Yeah, I know, I do. Well, I have a lot of years, so a lot of stories. But only last fall, when I was putting stuff away in my garage in a cooler, I thought it was a giant rat, and it was a possum. And
Little one?
Huh?
Little one?
Well, like this big.
Yeah, juvenile.
Juvenile. So what am I going to do with it? So I put it outside and put it in my wood pile and said, good luck. And I don't. So one is, why are possum? Have they migrated north? Obviously, there's one here. I didn't bring it in,
Right.
from the south. And two is that they love ticks, right?
Right.
So talk about
Turkeys do too.
turkeys do,
Turkeys do, yeah.
and chickens.
And chickens do, yeah. We have been taking possums in for probably 10 to 12 years. And when if we get a whole bunch of them at once, it's because the mother was found dead in the road. But when we typically get a possum in is in the wintertime, because they get frostbite. Their ears and their tails have no fur and they get frostbite. But we will take a possum.
So so possum are here. Mm-hmm. And have they always been here? I mean,
No. I don't know how long they've been here, but I want to say maybe 25, 30 years.
do you think that's climate related or just general migration?
Maybe just general migration. I think, I don't know. We don't get a lot of them to say we've got an explosion up here, but we get some.
Are they? I mean, what do they eat? I mean, where do they live, for one thing? And do they winter over? Do they winter over?
They do, usually under somebody's shed, under their garage, in their wood piles.
Right.
They're kind of like Fisher. They're very opportunistic as far as what they eat. When we take Fisher in, people think that they are carnivores, and they are carnivores, but we feed them a very broad-based diet of vegetables, fruits, mice pieces, which we don't go out and trap and kill, we order. But opossums have to start on a vet diet, because when they come in, they're emaciated because it's winter and they've been out in the cold. They have lost their body heat, what they have, through their ears and They're
So we call them possums, but in England they call them opossums, right? But it's the
Yeah.
same, is that the same
it's
thing?
the same thing.
Okay. And now they're not a rabies vector, so is there any reason not to pick up a possum? I mean, they just kind of freaky looking, but besides that, they seem pretty friendly.
We call them land alligators because if you see them with their mouth open, I don't know how
They have
many
a lot of
teeth they've
teeth.
got. They have a lot of teeth. They don't typically carry rabies. It's one of the only mammals that I can say that about, but they've got a very, very low body temperature. So yes, you can pick up an opossum. Again, don't touch any wildlife barehanded.
Okay. And so you can pick them up and just move them around. But I was going to ask, so when you mentioned rabies a number of times, does rabies, the prevalence of rabies kind of swing up and down, and are we in a upstage or downstage, or how does that work?
We're not seeing a lot of it right now. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an expert on diseases. I'm not, whether it's the avian flu or canine distemper or rabies, but I do know all the signs. I know the symptoms. I know who to call when I need to. But we don't see a lot of rabies. We are a little bit nervous about avian flu. I don't know where that's going to go. We do keep mouth swabs at the Wildlife Center. We do quarantine waterfowl when it comes in, so that if we take in a goose or a duck or something, first of all, we're not going to take one that's showing any signs of being ill. But if one comes in, we do keep it separate from everything else. But we can do mouth swabs.
So when you mentioned avian flu, there's a duck right there.
Right.
Looks like he's in the Conway Lake. No, it's a bathtub. So avian flu, I mean, we've read about that because it's affecting chickens and actually eggs.
And
Get fewer
cattle.
eggs. Huh?
Cattle.
And cattle. So why do you even mention that here? Like, where would it come from? Is it all through domestic, or did a duck fly?
It's coming back with your migratory birds. Now, where that crosses over into your farm animals or something else, I don't know, because that's beyond what I do. I do know that I heard on the news the other day that a bottlenose dolphin was diagnosed.
Gosh.
Now, where was that dolphin exposed to avian flu?
And is avian flu dangerous to people?
We are fully protected when we deal with things like that.
You at the center.
At the center,
Right.
Yeah. And as far as the general public, again, gloves. But if you've got to pick anything up at all, and Fish and Game is pretty adamant about not stopping your car and going back and picking things up out of the road. You can cause a major accident. If there's nobody around, you can do it safely. I do.
Turtles.
That's right here.
Okay, just talk about I love turtles. Yeah.
Then you're probably not going to go out and hit one. But
No.
But people do, and you should be really careful of turtles at this time of year because they are crossing the road. They're looking for places to lay their eggs in the sand, and especially your snapping turtles. We had one come in, I think it was last year, that was hit over on Route 16 in Shikorowa. It was close to the size of this table.
Yeah.
So you know it was decades and decades old.
And you can pick those guys up. Because I live near Conway Lake, and so I have snapping turtles. And if you grab them by the back, by the caper, is that what it's called? No.
Carapace.
Carapace, thank you. You know, even though they try to get you,
Yeah.
they can't.
What you can do is take a stick, have them grab hold of that stick, and lead them off the road. And always, if you're going to move a turtle, make sure you move it in the direction it's going. If you turn around and try and get it to go backwards, they're smarter than we are. They're just going to turn around and go the other way. And don't pick them up and relocate them because they're always going to be seeking out their natal waters.
Okay, so first of all, see which direction they're going.
Right.
And go that way. All right, so we only have 5 minutes left. Rob, I think we saw a shot of a moose. We should get to moose. And you take in baby moose?
Yes, we do.
And so there are two right there.
Yep.
So, I mean, this time of year, particularly, and I always call it Moose Alley up on Route 16 in Pinkham Notch, going by the Dana place there. Gosh, I've seen a lot in my life
Right.
right there. And they get hit right there.
Right.
So that's usually what happens is the parent gets hit and you end up with the babies?
Right. The one on the left was male. The one on the right was a little female. They're not related. They came in a week apart. Moose calves actually come in before deer fawns. So moose calves could be coming in anytime from next week on. They stay with us later than deer fawns. Deer fawns are released the Tuesday after Labor Day, just for
Labor Day in September?
Yeah.
You keep a deer fawn all summer?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And even sometimes then I question whether or not they're mature enough to go, because they come in at different times, but they're also herd animals, so they build bonds within the pen. But your moose calves we keep until the first week in November, because I'm not going to let them go before the hunt.
Oh, and how do they acclimate if they've been basically domesticated by you?
We've never had a problem. And this is my 23rd year of doing deer fawns. Last year was the first year that we ear tagged them. They blended right into the landscape and they never showed up. They were not taken in the hunt. They weren't seen.
How do you feel about hunting?
It has its place.
All right, so obviously you're not a pro advocate of hunting, but it sounds like you just respect the fact that there are hunters.
We have a lot of hunters who fill our freezers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we do.
Very good. What else we got? Oh, and speaking of the moose, there's a baby. What is that?
Little hawk.
A little hawk.
Yep, and we're going to start getting these. They hatch out in June, fall out of their nest. No, they hatch out earlier than that. They fall out of their nest mid to late June to early July, and this is how we get them.
Oh, which reminds me, I have another personal wildlife story. A couple of years ago, over on my garage, I just have an outdoor light like people do, 8 feet up, and a robin's nest, you know, like they do, made a nest. And sure enough, when I would come home, and I know when they fledge, they can get their wings and their feet going really within a day or two. But for about a week, when I came home, boom, there was one on the ground. There's no way that thing was moving. I'd put it back.
Yep.
Next day, put it back. Next day,
Yep.
put it back. Next day, put it back. And then eventually, I found them, but they're out on the lawn. I said, okay, you're on your own now.
Right.
So is that, do you recommend people putting?
Absolutely. Were the parents there taking care of
Yeah.
them? Yeah, okay. And if they're not going to stay in the nest, you can try getting a bigger thing like a blueberry basket, put some grasses and stuff in it, and attach it somehow to the area next to the nest.
And use that as the nest. I mean, whoop, put them in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what struck me and what seemed obvious to me, because I could see them, is that many had survived. I can't remember if there were 3 or 4. I think it just got too crowded in there.
Well, they got too big. Right. Yep. And they were at the verge of fledging, and there wasn't enough room in the nest, and they were coming out. But yeah, put them back in the nest. And if you see birds on the ground, give us a call. And if you see the parents around, leave them alone. The parents, 99% of the cases of people picking up wildlife, the parents are there watching you.
All right, so if you see, in fact, last year I saw, which I had never seen before, a little tiny, I think it was a sparrow. And it was like hiding underneath, like I could, you know, oh, wow, there's a little tiny sparrow. Leave them alone, right? I mean, don't, just because you see something, you don't necessarily pick it up.
Correct.
Right. All right, we have 1 minute to go. Anything, I want to ask you, go ahead. What's on your list?
I think we hit it all.
Now, what's the moose population? I know it's the ticks, right?
Yeah, ticks are taking them. But the other thing that we run into orphaning calves would be brainworm. That's when you see the moose circling round and round, and they have to be euthanized by Fish and Game. So that can orphan a calf. We've had a couple of calves come in that were orphaned because their mothers had brainworm.
Now, the brainworm, I can't, you're going to know this, but the brainworm doesn't affect deer or does affect deer, or they carry it?
It does not.
But they carry it.
Correct. I may have to look this up to be absolutely sure, but it's something that the deer pick up browsing on the ground, pass through their feces, and this is how this whole thing goes round and round.
So they're not, so a healthy deer population can actually compete with the moose population, if that's...
Yeah, except you're probably going to have 10 times more deer in the state than moose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our moose population, how do you describe it? Is it anywhere, I know it's declined a lot.
My personal feeling is that when the moose population was in its biggest decline, we should have put a moratorium on the hunting of the moose. But, you know, that's just my personal feeling. So,
But now, and they still have the lottery, I think.
right.
But they really, I mean, it's just a revenue generator, and they don't give out very many.
No, they don't.
licenses. They could-
Probably not enough that's going to make a great big
right.
difference.
All righty, Cathie, it's been a pleasure, and
Thank
good
you.
luck this spring with all your little friends.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care,
Thanks,
Mark.
Cathie. Okay.
Are we off?